In continuing to review my favorite Jolly, we're going to talk about another one today, Obsession, A Taste for Fear. This one seems to be a bit more obscure, and I say that because it doesn't have a Wikipedia article. It only has 39 reviews on Letterboxd, and as far as I can tell, it has never had a proper DVD or Blu-ray release, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. But this movie that we're talking about today, this is an LGBTQ sci-fi 80s Giallo, y'all. One of you guys recommended this film to me a while back, and I'm so sorry I didn't save your name. That was before I started saving that information. Anyway, you recommended it because I love Fatal Frames, and that was a very, very good, well-received recommendation here. This movie is great. So this video you're about to watch, it's not going to have major spoilers. There are going to be like little spoilers, like I'm going to talk about the kill count number, but I'm not going to like tell you who the killer is, you know? So just proceed with caution, mild spoilers. Obsession, A Taste for Fear was released in 1987. It is directed by Pietro Raffanini. And apparently this is the only film he directed? Like, weird, I don't really know what became of him, like where he ended up, but this is his only film, it looks like. It is starring Virginia Hay, Gerard Darmon, Tegan Clive, and Dario Parsini. This film is borderline abstract, so it was hard for me to describe, to like create a synopsis for you, so I'm gonna read a few from the internet before we move forward. IMDb. A cop is assigned to catch a serial killer who is murdering his way through Rome's sexual underground. I think this is kind of a weird synopsis because the film isn't about the cop at all. Google. Someone methodical is killing a photographer's models of fashionably decadent erotica. Also kind of a weird synopsis. But here's what we get from Letterboxd. Diane is a photographer of the ultimate in trendy softcore. Her ex, George, who makes bondage films, hooks Diane up with the muscular Tegan in exchange for a favor with a well-heeled client. Diane asks Tegan to model for her in the next shoot. When Tegan turns up bound, gagged, and dead, a rough policeman, Lieutenant Arnold, focuses his suspicions on George. When a second model dies and video discs show up depicting the murders, Arnold is certain he has his man, except that the killer we see in the videos is a red-headed woman. Diane's assistant, Valerie, can't keep her eyes off Diane, and Diane's mixer, Paul, also tries to be her protector. Do the cops have the wrong person? So, Diane is this really pushy, bossy, mean, almost vicious, like HBIC vibes. She's very, very passionately and intensely directing these photo shoots, and you know, the high regard she was holding her work to, I was thinking like this is a high fashion magazine she's shooting for. But these synopses kind of describe it as artistic softcore, right? And then I did notice in the movie the way the cop was talking to Diane about her work gives this all a little more clarity. I think what we're dealing with here in the film, this is a community of sex workers. Anyway, everyone is pretty much obsessed with Diane, her personal assistant, her photography assistant, her ex-husband. Diane is just, you know, she's just doing her thing, you know, she's getting around, men, women, whatever. She gets hooked up with Tegan, this female bodybuilder, and then Tegan ends up dead. And this cop that gets assigned to the case, he's like a dirty cop. So meanwhile, Diane and Tegan's roommate kind of follow some threads to see what kind of information they can find about this murder, and more murders happen. Okay, let's talk about this film. At first, we'll talk about the setting. for me, I could not discern what country or city this was supposed to be in, but one of these synopses said it was Rome, so sure. The film sort of has this like shadowy, claustrophobic nature to it, so we don't see the city, like we don't see a city view. A lot of times we're usually like in the studio or in the apartment, we're in these small spaces, and then when we do get out, it's at night. So you're not really seeing where we are. But that was probably very intentional because we are dealing with like an underground sort of community, so it has this underground feel to it. But yeah, I don't know, it had this like isolated feeling to it. We didn't really meet a lot of people. We didn't see too much of the community. We didn't see like Diane's publications on the shelves or anything like that. So I don't know, it felt like small. It felt small. And our characters, we didn't really like get to know our characters. We just watched them do things, if that makes sense. But again, that could very well all be intentional. This film is also, as I mentioned, kind of a sci-fi. What? Okay, the time period we are in, it is unclear, but it would seem we are in the future, which is freaking weird for a Giallo. It's kind of subtle, but there's a lot of futuristic technology featured in this movie. When I first watched this movie, the thing that made me realize like, oh, this is some sort of sci-fi was the laser gun, the pew pew laser gun that the cop had. The other devices and technology in this film, like it didn't hit me that we're in the future. I just mistook this for wealth rather than futurism. For one, we have Virginia. She's looking in, it's like she's looking in the mirror, except her face is being projected onto this like much larger screen. Her shower, it doesn't seem to just rain from above, like it seems to shoot water in all directions. We have a touch screen kiosk that allows Virginia to pick out the outfit she's gonna wear. I keep calling her Virginia, but it's Diane. I'm terribly sorry. The actress's name is Virginia, but her name is Diane. I will try to not do that anymore. We have a silent blow dryer. I would love that. We have a sort of like GPS kind of thing. We have a cell phone. We see basically Skype being used. And of course, there's some cars that are like, it's like they're supposed to be hovercrafts or something. Anyway, there's some like futuristic cars that are like, whoo. Okay, let's talk about Diane, who I've also referred to as Virginia. Diane, who was played by Virginia. Diane is lovely in this kind of like madame kind of way, like in this very mature woman kind of way. So I looked it up and she's only 36 at the time of filming, but she definitely seems like she could even be older, but I don't mean that in a bad way. In my journey through Giallo and other Euro films from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it is refreshing because it seems like the filmmakers tended to value and venerate older women a little bit more, like placing them in leading roles. I'm thinking about like Anita Eckhart, Anita Strindberg. I think about like Ursula Andress from Mountain of the Cannibal God. It's just really nice to see someone who's like a little older being the object of desire. I know, male gaze or whatever, but being the object of desire in a film. And it's not that America and modern films don't do that now, but it does, at least from my perspective, seem like the gaze, like the attention has shifted to women more in their 20s when it comes to like lead roles. Is that just me? I mean, I know it depends on the story, but this is Madame vibes, you know? This is a woman who is a boss, so obviously she has to be older. But yeah, I love that she's just a total babe and venerated as a woman past 35. Diane is very mean and she's scary. And I think it's a really interesting choice for a protagonist because It's like, are we on her side? Do we like her? She kind of reminds me of Joya from Delirium Photo of Joya, but she's meaner. Here's one quote that I saved. If I wanted you as a model, then I wouldn't be using you as an assistant, now would I? Other characters in this film, in the way that the 80s does sometimes, they're kind of cartoonish, like over the top, theatrical, if you will. I think about like Tegan the bodybuilder and even the cop. They're hilariously extra. They made me feel like I was watching Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers or something like that. And then we have Diane's ex, George. He looks a lot like Silvano Tranquilli. And I think he's pretty fine. And I also just have to take a moment for the representation. In this movie, we get a really diverse cast, you know, unconventional people, again, like this female bodybuilder. We have plenty of people of color and plenty of gay people represented. And it's not just girls being naked all the time, it's also men who are scantily clad. It has this very fluid feel here. So we have like this gender fluidity, this sexual fluidity. There's just this general lack of structure in these people's lives and also these people's like presentation and identity, which makes the whole film just seem that much more otherworldly. Let's talk about, you know, the two things we see a lot of in Giallo and other exploitation, and that's the violence and the sex. I'm reporting to you what I saw. This is a very sexual film. It doesn't straight up show like the sex scenes. It more it shows like pieces and parts, you know? It's hard to explain, but it's like, I described it in my Letterboxd review as more teasy than sleazy. But it is still quite an erotic film. It's just, you're not like seeing everything happen, if that makes sense. There is a lot of nudity, but what there's not a lot of is violence. In true Giallo fashion, we do have a black-gloved killer, but we don't really get to see them in action. And the body count is only 4. The killer reveal is satisfactory, but there's not a lot of jaw-dropping twists. But let me tell you what we get from this movie instead. The vibe. How to describe this film. You may know that part of why I love Fatal Frames is the use of color, vivid colored lights, light and shadow, and fog machines, baby. And we get all of that in this film, even more saturated, more vivid, more crazy than Fatal Frames. It is so surreal. It is an absolute dream to look at. This film and its visuals just really take you out of reality. It is hypnotizing, it is disorienting, it is hallucinogenic. It'll have you like, what is happening? There's also a little pinch of absurdity in this movie. Like when Diane goes to Tegan's apartment, Tegan's roommate is just like riding a bicycle around the apartment in circles. Again, what is happening? It's hard to describe, but this movie kind of makes me feel like I'm like lost and floating. You know, I'm like, where am I? When am I? I don't belong here. I also get kind of lost in the obscurity of the film itself. You know, it's almost practically lost media. All of that makes the film just really haunting. What can you expect when you have wealth plus futurism plus surrealism? My friends, you get some excellent decor. Primarily, I want to talk about George's house. I can't see it well. I need a high quality version of this movie. But George's house, it's like, it like has a lazy river in it or something, or a creek. I don't know. And I also thought it might be like a pool, and then he has like a boardwalk on top of the pool, and like that's where he lives and does his stuff. It is a room with running water in it, and it's all lit up in these colored lights, and it's just like, it blows my mind. Like, I need a better look at it, and I need to be in it. I'd like to think it's a lazy river in his home. Okay, and I do want to talk about the music very briefly. This is quite an interesting soundtrack. It features a lot of like actual pop songs. The soundtrack is hilarious. Like, it's almost mismatched. It's like random. It's almost like it's designed to confuse you because you're like, what's the time period? What's the vibe? There's even like a doo-wop song in there. But also a couple songs that I really do like. But I imagine that somebody like went to the thrift store and dug through the bin of tapes and then like just pulled out some random tapes and pieced together the soundtrack like that. I just made that up though, okay? That's not what happened. But as for the viewing experience, the uploads I have found are poor quality. They're muddled. There's one that has like decent audio but poor video and vice versa. This film begs for a high quality release. It is too beautiful. It is too visually beautiful. We have to see it better. And like I said, I need a better look at George's room. I need to. Anyway, I will link below the uploads that are currently available if you want to watch this movie and you haven't already. And finally, let's talk about some cons of this film. I feel like they didn't lean into the sci-fi futurism enough. It's very subtle. And it didn't have anything to do with anything. Like, the story could have completely existed without the sci-fi aspect. I don't know. I just thought it was fun. I would have liked to see a little bit more of it. We definitely need more violence. And I think they could have leaned into the whole like snuff film thing a little bit more because like in Fatal Frames, the killer films the victims. And here in Obsession, the killer is like filming the actual murder, which is just really cool. It's a cool concept here, especially considering this community of characters who are like doing videos for hire, right? What's the most extreme kind of video that you could do? And I think that I wish that the killer, like, that there was like some sort of demand for these videos that the killer was making. I think that would have made it a little interesting. And we didn't even get to see much of those videos. And I think the story could have been explained a little better. Like I said, when I came out of it, I wasn't sure how to write a synopsis, and I could see, well, by reading the reviews on Letterboxd, I wasn't the only one that felt like that. So it seemed like they could have given the audience a little better context of what's going on and who these people are and what they're doing and where we are. And finally, I would just say, like, there's no depth to the characters. There's not like character development. Even with Diane, she's kind of inconsistent. Like sometimes she'd be really sweet and nurturing towards somebody, and then on the same day she might be completely vicious to someone. Final thoughts. This film is about the experience. It's about the journey, and it's about the visuals. It's about getting lost in a surreal wonderland of sex work. It's definitely not for everyone, and I think it could be described as style over substance, but I do consider it to be like a hidden gem of the genre, especially for those who enjoy like an experimental aesthetic. Now, I'm going to start this new thing when I review a movie, hopefully, called Put It in a 3-Pack. So if I were to put this in a 3-pack, you know, Forgotten Jolly style or Giallo Essentials style, I would put Obsession, A Taste for Fear with Fatal Frames and Delirium, Photo of Joya, because they're all late period Jolly that seem to be love or hate, are a little bizarre and just kind of surreal. And finally, let's go through the Giallo checklist and see which boxes Obsession ticked. Gloves, check. Quirky cop, check. Infidelity, well, no one's married, so no. Lesbian couple, check. Smoking, check. Alcohol as medicine, check. Clothing tears off surprisingly easy. Yeah, I think we had a little bit of that. Terrible dancing, no, but there's great, beautiful dancing in the movie. Like, amazing dancing, actually. People falling in love in a matter of days or hours. Check. So we did get a little bit on the Giallo checklist, but not as much because this one is very weird. We have a Daisy. She's getting bigger every day. Oh, okay. Anyway, so that was a pretty long review of Obsession: A Taste for Fear. Have you seen it? What do you think? If you haven't seen it, are you interested, or did I scare you away? Well, hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about a movie that's way too obscure. Maybe I'll do something more popular next time. But till then, ciao.